CEO arrested for breaching the U.S. Capitol during Trump-fueled insurrection business. The CEO of a Chicago company said he was arrested after breaching the U.S. Capitol during Wednesday's Trump-fueled insurrection in Washington, D.C. Brad Rukstales, CEO of the marketing technology firm Cogensia, apologized for what he called a moment of extremely poor judgment. "It was the single worst personal decision of my life," Rukstales said in a statement posted on Twitter. Cogensia, based in the Chicago suburb of Schaumburg, sought to distance itself from its CEO, whom the company said has been placed on leave of absence. Mr. Rukstales' actions were his own. He was not acting on behalf of our company, nor do his actions in any way reflect the policies or values of our firm, Cogensia said in a statement posted on LinkedIn. Neither Rukstales nor Cogensia were reachable for further comment. The U.S. Capitol Police did not respond to a request for comment to confirm the arrest. 5 people died as a result of Wednesday's insurrection, including a U.S. Capitol Police officer. A federal murder investigation has been opened into the officer's death. House Democrats plan to introduce articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump as early as Monday for incitement of insurrection, according to sources familiar with the matter in a draft article obtained by CNN, without qualification, and as a peaceful and law-abiding citizen. "I condemn the violence and destruction that took place in Washington," Rukstales said in his statement. The Cogensia CEO said that following the rally in Washington, he followed hundreds of others through an open set of doors to the Capitol building to see what was taking place inside. Rukstales said he was arrested and charged with unlawful entry. "My decision to enter the Capitol was wrong, and I am deeply regretful to have done so," he said. A number of other people present at Wednesday's unrest have faced consequences from their employers. Navistar, a direct marketing company in Maryland, fired an employee who was photographed wearing his company ID badge inside the U.S. Capitol building. "While we support all employees' right to peaceful, lawful exercise of free speech, any employee demonstrating dangerous conduct that endangers the health and safety of others will no longer have an employment opportunity with Navistar Direct Marketing," the company said in a statement provided to CNN. A congressman got on his knees to pick up trash left after the deadly Capitol riot. Representative Andy Kim says he was devastated to see the smashed furniture, broken American flags, cigarette butts and other debris left behind by the pro-Trump mob that ran wild in the U.S. Capitol. So he found a trash bag, got down on his knees and helped clean up. "It was really just kind of instinctual. I didn't really think about it, I just wanted to do something," the New Jersey Democrat told CNN. "I just really felt like I needed to try to play a role in just fixing this mess that had occurred." Kim sheltered in his office in the Rayburn House office building during Wednesday's riot and went to House floor once it was safe, to complete the process of affirming President-elect Joe Biden's Electoral College victory. "We had this really unbelievably raw debate that unfolded. Everyone was very emotional, still really quite shaken, still," Kim said. Early Thursday morning, he decided to take a walk around the building, which was still littered with broken glass and other debris. "I made my way back to the rotunda and was just devastated by just what I had seen, just the absolute terrible condition that it was in, the trash and debris over the statues, the floor. Some of the benches were askew, and there was a lot of broken furniture, broken American flags and different elements there." He saw a police officer throwing away a pizza box and asked him if there were any more trash bags. Then he picked up trash in the Capitol Rotunda and the National Statuary Hall. A photographer took pictures of Kim working and they were shared widely on social media. New Jersey Gov. Phil Murphy shared the photo on Twitter and said Kim represents the very best of New Jersey and our nation. A true public servant who makes us proud every single day. At one point, Kim passed a plaque marking the cornerstone that was laid by President George Washington. A moment like that really reminds me that this building is bigger than all of us. A democracy is bigger than all of us and it deserves and demands our respect, Kim said. Kim is the son of Korean immigrants and said he's humbled to represent New Jersey's 3rd District, which President Trump won in 2016 and 2020. He's also in outer work in the Capitol, which he called the temple of our democracy. If someone feels the ability to desecrate our Capitol, to bring a Confederate flag into that building and proudly wave it around, this is someone. These are people that do not respect government, Kim said. They do not have that same humility that we need to have. These are people that are not inspired by this building, and do not understand what went into building it, what went into preserving it. 5 people died during the insurrection, including Capitol Police Officer Brian D. Sicknick. Kim is one of the long list of Democratic lawmakers calling for President Trump to be removed from office before President-elect Biden takes office on January 20th. We do need to take urgent action. But that's not going to fix everything, he said. He said it was vital to work to restore Americans' respect for the government and each other. I am hopeful, but I'm not naive. I understand the deep challenges that we face, Kim said. Arizona, hottest hotspot for COVID-19 as health officials warn of hospital strain. Arizona has become the hottest hotspot for COVID-19, as the state experiences the highest case rates in the world and record hospitalizations, and health officials warn the numbers are only going to get worse due to holiday gatherings. Arizona reported 9,909 new COVID-19 cases and 297 new deaths on Thursday, the highest single-day tally yet, though the state health department noted most were due to the death certificate matching process. Arizona has the worst rates of COVID-19 cases globally, according to 91-devoc.com, a COVID-19 tracker. The state currently has the highest 7-day average of COVID-19 infections per capita of any region in the world, based on Johns Hopkins University data. Arizona also leads the country in hospitalization rates, according to the COVID Tracking Project. There were 4,920 hospitalizations reported Thursday, the highest number for the 4th straight day. Staffing concerns statewide. 7% of intensive care unit beds were available as of Wednesday, according to data from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Banner Health cares for roughly half of all COVID-19 patients in Arizona, officials said. The situation in the state is beyond concerning, Dr. Marjorie Bessel, chief clinical officer for the hospital system, said during a press briefing Wednesday. Hospitals in the state of Arizona are stretched very thin right now, despite a considerable amount of preparation and work to increase capacity, Bessel said. Banner Health canceled elective surgeries at all of its Arizona hospitals on Jan. 1. Its occupancy in Arizona is above 100% of its licensed bed capacity, Bessel said Wednesday, though staffing is the system's greatest concern. We can create beds, we believe, she said. It's the skilled staff, that expert nurse, that wonderful doctor, that incredibly diligent respiratory therapist. Those are the individuals that are stretched really thin right now. And there's just not that many more of them in the entire country because they are deployed in each and every state trying to meet the demands of every community. Bessel anticipates hospitalizations will only get worse in the coming weeks due to the stacking effect of Thanksgiving activities, Christmas time activities and New Year's Eve. Wait times are another concern, as hospitals may have to hold patients in emergency rooms because there are no available staffed ICU or inpatient beds. The wait may be anywhere from a few hours to upwards of 24 to 48 hours in the emergency department until we're able to move somebody from the emergency department up into a hospital bed, Dr. Michael White, chief clinical officer for Valleywise Health in Maricopa County, said during a press briefing Wednesday. Calls for mitigation and enforcement as Arizona has become the hottest hotspot for COVID. Bessel is urging residents to shrink your circle to just those in their household. Wear a mask with people outside their circle and stop attending unmasked gatherings even if you feel well. It is very likely that someone at those gatherings has the virus, and they are spreading it to you, she said, noting that contact tracing is not beneficial because COVID-19 is so uncontrolled in our state. We need every one of you to do your part so that hospitals can remain open and accessible for all those in need of health care, she added. The health official also called for increased mitigation measures, such as a statewide mask mandate, curfew and halting indoor dining, and enforcement of existing measures. The state has not issued a mask mandate, though several cities and counties have. Citations for disregarding mask orders have not been issued in Tucson, Flagstaff, or the Phoenix area's 12 largest cities, according to a recent investigation by the Arizona Republic. Governor Ducey has also called on local governments to enforce measures. There are steps in place, and if many of these leaders that are reaching out and asking for additional actions would actually enforce and have accountability around the steps that are already there, we can further reduce the spread of this and save lives, Ducey said last month at a press briefing. In a January 3 report obtained by ABC News, the White House Coronavirus Task Force said that Arizona's post-holiday numbers raised significant concerns regarding community spread of COVID-19, and recommended a combination of aggressive mitigation with further restrictions and substantial acceleration of vaccinations. The Republican governor has not tightened restrictions despite calls to do so. Faced with strict mitigation measures in place and states that have few or minimal mitigation measures in place all are experiencing the same thing, Ducey spokesperson C.J. Karamargan told the Associated Press this week. The mitigation measures the state of Arizona put into place early on, they remain in place. We urge every Arizonan to follow them. Focus on vaccinations. The state has been prioritizing vaccination to combat the pandemic. The vaccine will save millions of lives going forward, and that is our focus today, Ducey said last month. More than 113,000 people as of Thursday, including frontline medical workers and residents and staff at nursing facilities, have been vaccinated in Arizona, according to the state health department. The goal is to get some 3.5 million people vaccinated, officials said. Staffing is a concern at vaccination sites, Bessel said. Banner Health is operating 3 vaccination sites throughout the state, requiring hundreds of staff and volunteers each day. Bessel herself has been redeployed to Banner Health's vaccination pod at the Arizona State Fairgrounds several times to administer vaccines, the spokesperson told ABC News. We are stretching ourselves as much as possible because we do believe that the vaccine is the way that we get out of the pandemic, she said. Volunteers trained by the Arizona National Guard started administering the COVID-19 vaccine on Wednesday and supporting vaccination sites in Arizona, officials said. They include retired medical professionals and people with a medical background. When people saw us out here, they wanted to step up and volunteer, which is exactly what we need, U.S. Army call. Tom Leeper, the Arizona National Guard state surgeon, told Phoenix ABC affiliate KNXV. We were contacted by a group of volunteers that said they wanted to help protect their state and their communities, and what can they do to help? For now, it is of critical importance that people continue to social distance, White said. Even though the vaccine is starting to be distributed in our community, it will be months before we are able to decrease our restrictions, he said. If we don't continue to do this, we are in danger of overwhelming our clinical departments and our hospitals. U.S. Capitol Police confirmed death of officer after pro-Trump riot. The U.S. Capitol Police confirmed the death of one of their officers late Thursday from injuries suffered when a mob of President Donald Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol a day before. Capitol Police said in a statement that Officer Brian D. Sicknick died at approximately 9:30 p.m. ET Thursday, due to injuries sustained while on duty. The death is being investigated by the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department's Homicide Branch, the U.S. Capitol Police and their federal partners. Officer Sicknick was responding to the riots on Wednesday, January 6, 2021, at the U.S. Capitol and was injured while physically engaging with protesters. He returned to his division office and collapsed. He was taken to a local hospital where he succumbed to his injuries, the statement read. Sicknick had joined the Capitol Police in July 2008, and most recently served in the department's first responders unit. The entire USCP department expresses its deepest sympathies to Officer Sicknick's family and friends on their loss, and mourns the loss of a friend and colleague, Capitol Police said. Sicknick is the fifth person to die as a result of Wednesday's insurrection. One woman was shot and killed by Capitol Police as the crowd breached the building, and 3 others suffered medical emergencies that proved fatal. Shortly after 1 p.m. ET Wednesday, hundreds of pro-Trump protesters pushed through barriers set up along the perimeter of the Capitol, where they tussled with officers in full riot gear, some calling the officers traitors for doing their jobs. About 90 minutes later, police said demonstrators got into the building and the doors to the House and Senate were being locked. Shortly after, the House floor was evacuated by police. Vice President Mike Pence was also evacuated from the chamber, where he was to perform his role in the counting of electoral votes. An armed standoff took place at the House front door at about 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and police officers had their guns drawn at someone who was trying to breach it. As a result of the episode, U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund is resigning. He said in a statement earlier Thursday that Capitol Police and other law enforcement officers were actively attacked with metal pipes and other weapons. They were determined to enter into the Capitol building by causing great damage, Sund said. The violent attack on the U.S. Capitol was unlike any I have ever experienced in my 30 years in law enforcement here in Washington, D.C., he added. Maintaining public safety in an open environment, specifically for First Amendment activities, has long been a challenge. Still, lawmakers say they are perplexed at the lack of preparedness among law enforcement, given that it had been known for weeks that Trump was promoting a rally he said was aimed at preventing the certification of Biden's win. Representative Mike Quigley, an Illinois Democrat who was locked in the House chamber during an armed standoff between Capitol Police and a rioter, praised the officers who were in the building that put their lives on the line, but made clear that they were outnumbered and law enforcement was underprepared. The Capitol Police I was around did an amazing job under difficult circumstances, Quigley told CNN. My concern wasn't with how valiant the Capitol Police were. It was that an hour before the debate started, I looked at the throngs of people surrounding different sections of the Capitol and said, we don't have enough security. Quigley added, I'm no expert in security, but you can tell we were outmanned in an hour before the debate, referring to Congress's proceedings to certify Biden's win. Problems grow at UK ports with backlogs and delays. New border rules introduced last week are already creating problems for importers and exporters, say firms. On Friday, Marks & Spencer became the latest company to warn of the administrative burden and increase in export costs to some countries. Parcels firm DPD has already suspended some services, and there have been warnings from seafood exporters. One export trade body told the BBC there was a growing problem and sense of unease among its members. Shane Brennan, chief executive of the Cold Chain Federation, which represents chilled transport and storage companies, said the emerging problems have come despite the amount of cross-border traffic still being quite low. Trade flows are still only about 50% of what we would expect, but even at those levels we're seeing levels of confusion and delays, he told the BBC's Today program. The feeling is we are building to quite a significant potential disruption. M&S said the new trade arrangements were creating very complex administrative processes. The red tape burden along with potential tariffs on some exports, will significantly impact our businesses in Ireland, the Czech Republic, and France, the retailer said. The retailer added that the free trade agreement with the EU would not mean extra tariffs on its core UK sales. John Lewis scrapping overseas deliveries. Were there hold-ups in first week after Brexit? Why are there empty shelves in some supermarkets? COVID tests for Channel hauliers to continue. The UK sealed a trade deal with the European Union (EU) on the 24th of December that was billed as preserving its zero tariff and zero quota access to the bloc's single market. But major retailers that use the UK as a distribution hub for European business could face possible tariffs if they re-export goods to the EU. Tariff-free does not feel like tariff-free when you read the fine print, M&S's chief executive Steve Rowe told Reuters on Thursday, ahead of the retailer's trading update on Friday. For big businesses there will be time-consuming workarounds, but for a lot of others this means paying tariffs or rebasing into the EU. The British Retail Consortium (BRC), which represents more than 170 major retailers, is working with members on short-term options and is seeking dialogue with the government and the EU on longer-term solutions to mitigate the effects of the new tariffs. The Cabinet Office said it was working closely with business to help them adapt to any new trading arrangements. Rotten fish. Scottish seafood exporters say they have been hit by a perfect storm of Brexit disruption, which could sink a centuries-old industry. These businesses are not transporting toilet rolls or widgets. They are exporting the highest quality, perishable seafood which has a finite window to get to markets in peak condition, said Donna Fordyce, chief executive of Seafood Scotland. If the window closes, these consignments go to landfill. In an email to its business customers, the company said that it had been a challenging few days for its international operation, and that it would pause and review its service. It plans to restart on the 13th of January. It has now become evident that we have an increased burden with the new, more complex processes and additional customs data we require from you for your parcels destined to Europe, the firm wrote. Hauliers grinding gears. The boss of one of Wales's largest haulier said logistical problems have emerged at the Irish border too. Andrew Kinsella, managing director of Gwynedd Shipping, said his company has a backlog of 60 lorries waiting to be shipped to Dublin. He said many hauliers are finding that their customers are not able to generate the special declarations that are needed to ultimately enable a lorry to get onto a ferry. Whilst you don't see queues at ports and terminals, the reality is that these queues are developing elsewhere in our depot in Holyhead, in our depot in Deeside, and in our depot in Newport in South Wales, and lots of hauliers have depots in the proximity of ports, he said. There are a lot of issues about demarcation, about who is going to arrange the export declaration with the UK revenue authorities, who's going to arrange the import declaration. The hauliers then trying to arrange the import safety and security declaration to create an ENS number which helps you generate a PBN number, so there has been a lot of everyone finding their feet. Moderna becomes third COVID vaccine approved in the UK. A third COVID vaccine has been approved for use in the UK. It is made by US company Moderna and works in a similar way to the Pfizer one that is already being offered on the NHS. The UK has ordered an extra 10 million doses of this vaccine, taking the total order to 17 million, but supplies are not expected to arrive until spring. Around 1.5 million people in the UK have had at least one dose of COVID vaccine so far. That includes almost a quarter of those aged over 80 in England. How will the UK vaccinate millions of people? When will you be eligible for a COVID vaccine? Vaccines are being given to the most vulnerable first, as set out in a list of 9 high-priority groups covering around 30 million people in the UK. The Prime Minister has said the aim is to vaccinate 15 million people in the UK by mid-February, including care home residents and staff, frontline NHS staff. everyone over 70 and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable, Health and Social Care Secretary Matt Hancock said. This is further great news and another weapon in our arsenal to tame this awful disease. The UK had originally ordered 7 million doses, but has increased this by 10 million to get even more people immunized as quickly as possible. Nadeem Zahawi, vaccine deployment minister, said, "The NHS is pulling out all the stops to vaccinate those most at risk as quickly as possible." With over 1,000 vaccination sites live across the UK by the end of the week to provide easy access to everyone, regardless of where they live. The Moderna vaccine will be a vital boost to these efforts and will help us return to normal faster. The Moderna vaccine requires temperatures of around 20 C for shipping, similar to a normal freezer. In comparison, the Pfizer-BioNTech one requires temperatures closer to 75 C, making transport logistics much more difficult. The AstraZeneca jab is easier to store and distribute, as it can be kept at normal fridge temperature. All of these vaccines require a second booster shot, but a first dose is likely to be given to as many people as possible. In trials with more than 30,000, the Moderna vaccine offered nearly 95% protection from severe COVID. No vaccine is 100% effective and it takes time for protection to build. For all of the COVID vaccines, we still do not know how long immunity will last. People who have received a coronavirus vaccine should continue to follow social distancing rules to protect themselves and others. EU regulators have already approved the Moderna vaccine, which is a new type called an mRNA vaccine that uses a tiny fragment of genetic code from the pandemic virus to teach the body how to fight COVID-19 and build immunity. Mental health is one of the biggest pandemic issues we'll face in 2021, with progress in efforts for COVID-19 vaccines and predictions for when the population will receive them. There seems to be a light at the end of the long, harrowing pandemic tunnel, as the physical risks are better managed with vaccines. However, what will likely still remain is the indelible impact of the pandemic weighing on the collective psyche. The physical aspects of the pandemic are really visible, said Lisa Carlson, the immediate past president of the American Public Health Association and an executive administrator at the Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta. "We have supply shortages and economic stress, fear of illness, all of our disrupted routines. But there's a real grief in all of that. We don't have a vaccine for our mental health like we do for our physical health," Carlson added. "So, it will take longer to come out of those challenges, based on the mental struggles endured by so many this year. These are the issues mental health professionals anticipate coming to the fore in 2021. Burnout and sedentism. Life was stressful before the pandemic, but new challenges have contributed an additional toll. Virtual homeschooling, staying safe, financial hardships, teleworking, keeping up with new information and coping with sickness and death can make life feel like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. Isolation, which can lead to loneliness, has hit people of all ages. Many children and adolescents have been missing out on opportunities important for social development. How you manage the stress is crucial to finding respite from the pandemic, Carlson said. And it comes back to the basics. Being safely outdoors and around trees, which Carlson thinks of as part of the public health team, can improve your overall health. When you can, take time to wind down and disconnect from the news, focusing on the basics to get sleep, to eat healthy meals, to move throughout the day. To spend time with pets and loved ones are going to be critically important, she added. Taking care of ourselves and each other should be everybody's focus as we go into 2021, when the pandemic sabotages sleep, since more time at home has meant more snoozing for some. The strange pandemic dreams people chattered about this year have greater opportunities to pop up, said Dr. Raj Dasgupta, a pulmonary and sleep doctor and an assistant professor of clinical medicine at Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California. Stress trauma, and new challenges are other factors that have led to sleep disturbances and disorders. People on the front lines of healthcare, those who witness death, and individuals who are stuck on cruise ships may experience post-traumatic stress that can lead to insomnia and nightmares. There are things that you see that are just etched in your mind, Dasgupta said. Lack of separation between work and home can mean irregular sleeping patterns. The pandemic really threw a curveball in our circadian rhythm, he added. Also, many people have been gaining weight, Dasgupta said. Weight has always been a risk factor when we talk about things like obstructive sleep apnea. Sleep apnea has been linked with a higher risk for developing depression and anxiety. Since sleep quality is linked to mental health, getting enough sunlight for a normal circadian rhythm, developing a sleep routine, and practicing relaxation techniques will be crucial in 2021. Some disorders thrive in isolation without support and accountability. Some people's recovery from eating disorders and substance use disorders has hit a wall. The collective trauma people are experiencing contributes to increased anxiety, depression, and other mental health factors commonly associated with eating disorders, said Chelsea Cronin-Gold, the communications manager of the National Eating Disorders Association, via email. Challenges have included concern about a lack of structure, more time in a triggering environment, and difficulty finding privacy for telehealth sessions and other virtual support. Some people with eating disorders have experienced increased symptoms as well, such as restricting or binging of food, or relapses. For those who aren't ready to recover or are still active in their disorders, isolation has been an opportunity to sustain disordered behaviors, a chance for which some may be grateful. While others are distraught, not only do eating disorders thrive in isolation, Cronin-Gold said, there is also added anxiety and guilt about the possibility of running out of food and/or having too much food available at all times. Drug relapses on opioids have spiked during the pandemic, and rates of substance use disorders could climb as the pandemic continues. We aren't experiencing these risks equally for many. Work is another source of mental challenge. People who can't shelter and work at home, can't avoid public transportation, or are unable to stock up on food may be taking an additional hit to their mental stability. Some of the fundamentals needed to support mental health are coupled with employment, Carlson said, so job loss can also mean losing your health insurance, child care, or paid sick leave. We were at risk before the pandemic, Carlson said. Communities of color are suffering even more. And there's a lot we don't know because there's a real lack of reporting of race statistics to help us really, truly understand the impact. Native American people's access to mental health services on reservations has further diminished, and things may not improve by the end of 2021. Jacques Gray said via email. Gray is the Associate Director of the Center for Rural Health at the University of North Dakota, where she is also a research associate professor. I know of one tribe where they have had multiple suicides between the ages of 20 to 40, Gray added. Leaving children to be raised by grandparents with no supports for counseling for the kids or help for the grandparents. Some studies have found a large increase in depression, particularly among Asians, said Dr. Tina Cheng, the chair of the University of Cincinnati's Department of Pediatrics and director of the Cincinnati Children's Research Foundation. Asian Americans and Chinese Americans have reported experiencing negative mental health symptoms due to pandemic-related racism. Pandemic-specific impacts on one's livelihood and well-being are expected to amplify the already declining mental health in U.S. society, said Jasmine Mina, an assistant professor of psychology at Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Frontline workers are another group for whom the pandemic is inescapable. Limited personal protective equipment, long workdays, sickness and deaths of patients and colleagues, exposure to COVID-19 and separation from home have worn down many healthcare professionals. Even outside of the pandemic, you're talking about a vulnerable population of people, said CNN chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN's television show, New Day. to come out of the challenges of mental health. We're gonna need to work together to do that, Carlson said. Many people who were gripped by anxiety and depression before the pandemic have experienced their levels of uncertainty, fear and anguish double or worse. Excessive hand-washing and fears of contamination can be hallmarks of obsessive-compulsive disorder, now and in the future. Some people with OCD may feel comforted by the public's acceptance of safety behaviors but also struggle to not become increasingly obsessive. For some people in the LGBTQ+ community, the pandemic has meant having to shelter in place with people who aren't accepting of their gender or sexual orientation. Such objection is sometimes expressed through violence, which could continue as the pandemic does. Rates of suicidal ideation are highest among youth in 2020, but especially among young LGBTQ+ people. The simple fact is inequity kills, Carlson said. We see those unequal things impacting health directly in the pandemic and really shining a light on problems that we knew were there but are much harder to ignore now. No longer infected, but still sick long haulers are the people who haven't fully recovered from COVID-19 weeks or even months after they last showed symptoms. In addition to the respiratory and neurological impacts some people experience long after they're no longer infected with coronavirus, mental effects have lasted as well. While concerns for psychological distress during the pandemic have mostly focused on anxiety and quarantine measures, one study said, a second wave of psychological morbidity due to viral illness may be imminent. People expect you to be sick for a certain amount of time and then you get better, Carlson said. These long haulers who have gone months of being sick are well beyond their own expectations or others' expectations of them. There's a real mental health challenge in that, she added. It's really going to cause struggle for them and for their loved ones, and for how they feel that other people feel about them. Silver linings of the pandemic. The mental burden of the pandemic has facilitated more honesty and empathy around mental health, which is key to dismantling the stigma that deters some individuals from seeking help. Another positive is that more people have been either reaching out for help or serving others, whether it's donating to an important cause, grocery shopping for neighbors, or cheering on those who serve the public. Being kind has its own benefits for mental health. Some people have found solace in telehealth services, a growing trend in receiving care that can be easier and more accessible. And many are picking up hobbies and endeavors, including meditation, gardening, adopting pets and baking bread, that could help make you feel better at times. There are definitely things here that are going to exacerbate each other, Carlson said. I really hope that above all, this is really the moment when we break down barriers to talking about mental health. Because I think the most important thing we can do, as professionals and in our families and in our communities, is to talk about it. Every time we talk about public health, we should talk about mental health. And every time we talk about COVID-19, we should talk about mental health. Twitter bans President Trump permanently. Twitter has suspended President Donald Trump from its platform, the company said Friday evening. After close review of recent tweets from the @RealDonaldTrump account and the context around them, we have permanently suspended the account due to the risk of further incitement of violence, Twitter said. In the context of horrific events this week, we made it clear on Wednesday that additional violations of the Twitter rules would potentially result in this very course of action. Twitter's decision followed 2 tweets by Trump Friday afternoon that would end up being his last. The tweets violated the company's policy against glorification of violence, Twitter said. And these 2 tweets must be read in the context of broader events in the country and the ways in which the president's statements can be mobilized by different audiences, including to incite violence, as well as in the context of the pattern of behavior from this account in recent weeks. The first tweet was about Trump's supporters. The 75 million great American patriots who voted for me, America First, and Make America Great Again, will have a giant voice long into the future. They will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any way, shape or form. The second indicated Trump did not plan to attend Joe Biden's inauguration. To all of those who have asked, I will not be going to the inauguration on January 20th. Twitter said the tweet concerning inauguration could be viewed as a further statement that the election was not legitimate. It also said that the tweet could be interpreted as Trump saying that the inauguration would be a safe target for violence because he would not be attending. Trump's other statement about American patriots suggested that he plans to continue to support, empower, and shield those who believe he won the election, Twitter said. Twitter's ban specifically addresses the @RealDonaldTrump account, not President Donald Trump personally. Twitter will enforce its policy against ban evasions to ensure that President Donald Trump does not circumvent his personal account suspension, the company told CNN. If it is clear that another account is being used for the purposes of evading a ban, it is also subject to suspension, Twitter said in a statement. For government accounts, such as at POTUS and at White House, we will not suspend those accounts but will take action to limit their use. However, these accounts will be transitioned over to the new administration in due course and will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary to alleviate real-world harm. Twitter's policy would also prohibit Trump from directing a third party to operate a Twitter account on his behalf. Civil rights leaders, who have long criticized tech platforms for spreading hate speech and division, welcomed Twitter's decision. Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, called it an excellent step, a fitting end to a legacy of spewing hate and vitriol, Greenblatt said. President Trump incited the violent riots at the Capitol using social media and paid the price. Eric Nang, a spokesman for Muslim advocates, said Twitter is showing real leadership, as Twitter notes, letting Trump continue to post tweets, Facebook posts and YouTube videos for his white nationalist supporters risks further incitement of violence, Nang said. Now it is up to Facebook and Google, YouTube to follow Twitter's lead.